Hey everyone, welcome back to MNMMPT NAATI YouTube channel. This is Manmohit. In today's video, I am going to discuss with all of you about NAATI Punjabi note-taking strategies. I would be going over few things, few key strategies and tips that can actually help you in the exam scenario so that can help you in tackling the most difficult component of this NAATI exam, which is the note taking and then delivering the information. Now, if you haven't watched the previous video of mine of NAATI Punjabi where I gave the introduction about NAATI exam, how the scoring works and everything, I would encourage all of you to watch that first and then watch this video. Otherwise, if you already know what NAATI Punjabi exam is all about, how the scoring works, these two dialogues and all that stuff, if you know the basic stuff of it, this video is definitely for you. Watch this video until the very end to understand how to do the note taking in the real exam. Now, we all know in NAATI Punjabi that we would be getting two different dialogues, and those two dialogues will come one after one. That means the moment you start with the first dialogue, and once you finish up that first dialogue, straight away the second dialogue will start with just a duration of 1 minute in between. Now, what happens in the dialogue is there are two speakers. One is an English speaker, whereas the other speaker is purely a Punjabi speaker. And your job is to, when you listen to the English segment, your job is to translate that to Punjabi. And when you listen to the Punjabi segment, your job is to translate that to English. Now, first key strategy that I would encourage all of you is forget Punjabi. That means when you're taking notes, even if you feel that your writing speed in Punjabi is good enough, still I would encourage all of you to take notes in English instead of Punjabi, even though, or simple terms, use your text message language. Now, I'm pretty sure whenever you talk to someone, especially with your friends, you never really type Punjabi to them. You always type your message in English, but you have that Roman English that you're going to use. For example, if you're asking your friend ki hal hai, you never write ki hal hai like this using or while typing a text message. We always write it like ki hal hai. And the reason for that is pretty straightforward, because from the very beginning, we have been trained in such a way that we are very quick in writing English as compared to writing Punjabi. Also, in Punjabi, we have to take care of many, you can say, those matras and all that stuff. For example, k and then this one. Then if there is some sort of a dot or something like that, that things are also need to be taken care of. So while writing English, there's very easy way we can paraphrase that. Also, it's extremely easy to abbreviate those words. For example, if you want to ask someone ki hal hai, you can even write it like this: ki hal hai. Hai can only be written as h. So it's very easy to abbreviate in English. That's my point. So whenever you listen to a segment, that's the very first strategy. Forget Punjabi. We are not going to take notes in Punjabi at all. We are only going to take notes in English. Second key strategy that I would like to discuss with all of you is, now, if you have heard a dialogue, I will also play a few segments of the dialogue and take notes in front of you. What happens in a dialogue is the very first segment that they speak, we never know which language are they going to speak that in. They can either speak English, they can also speak Punjabi as the first segment. Now, the first segment is the one that you have to be very careful with. For example, in the first segment, there was an English speaker who started the conversation. He said, "Hi, my name is Robert. Welcome to my office. How are you doing today?" So that's my first segment. Which language was it? English. Now, after you have taken notes of that, let's say that's my notes. On your notebook, just put the letter P on the left hand side of your note taking before you start speaking out your answer. Now, let me tell you what will happen because of that. The most common and the silliest mistake that students make in the NAATI exam is that since they are under pressure in the exam, they will listen to a segment, and when they are about to repeat out the answer, they will just speak out the answer in the very same language again. So what I mean is, they will listen to the segment in English, and while they're about to translate that, they will speak out the same segment in English again, thinking that they've done the correct job. However, they will get a straight 0 for that segment. So to avoid that error happening, this is how it is going to save you. Now, as I said, you have to be very careful with the very first segment. But once the first segment is done, after that, your job is very easy. What you need to do is, before you listen to the audio of the second segment, before you listen to the audio, just put a letter E and then arrow. After that, you start listening to the segment, you start taking your notes. That's fine. However, now by looking at this E letter, you already know that doesn't matter which language you have taken these notes in, you are only going to speak English in this segment, because you have already told yourself that I heard the segment in Punjabi and now my job is to translate that out into the English language. Same thing you're going to repeat in the next segment. Before the audio starts playing for the third segment, just write down the letter P now, because it's always going to be alternate. If they speak an English segment first, the next segment is always going to be Punjabi. The next segment is always going to be English. The segment coming after that is always going to be Punjabi. They never give two English segments together, nor do they give two Punjabi segments together. Now, this step is extremely crucial since, as I said, as my very first step, always take notes in English. So whatever language they are speaking out their segments, you are taking notes in English only. And since you are taking all your notes in English, your brain might get confused as to which language you actually have to speak out in form of your answer. So that was tip number 2. Always put these letters just before you start taking notes. So one question from your side to me could be that, hey, if I'm taking notes of English segment in English, it makes sense. But how will I take notes of a Punjabi segment in English? My brain can't process the Punjabi segment into English on the spot, or my brain can't process every single Punjabi word into English on the spot. That is when the Roman English come into the picture. If you remember from the very beginning, that was my very first step. Ki hal hai. Now, technically I have written English, but if you look at this, the words are Punjabi itself. This is what you actually need to do in the Punjabi segment, that when they speak it out, if you know the English translation of certain Punjabi words, prefer writing those words in English straight away, so that once you're about to translate it, you don't have to worry about translating every single word on the spot. Otherwise, if your brain is not able to figure out the translated version of the word, just write down the Punjabi words in this Roman English. Afterwards, while you are trying to, or while you're going to speak out your answer, just read out the words and then translate based on that. That was tip number 2. Tip number 3 is use abbreviations. Now, I cannot stress this thing enough that there is no way on this earth that you can write every single word from the segment word by word, because they will speak out 25, 30, 35 words within 5-6 seconds. Your hands, or you are not trained, or you're not a robot that you can write 30, 25, 35 words within 5 seconds. It's never going to happen. Always use abbreviations. That's very important. Now, abbreviations, and I will add to this strategy that only write down the main words, not every single word. Now I'll explain what that means. For example, my sentence is Adelaide is a beautiful city. I will play a few segments at the end of the video and do a few note taking in front of you so that you actually understand the things that I'm explaining, how to implement them. Now, Adelaide is a beautiful city. For example, that's my English segment. Now, while am I taking notes, I am not going to write down the words such as is, these kind of words. I know they are important for the grammar, but this much you have to rely upon your memory. You're just going to write down the main important words in the abbreviated form. So when they say Adelaide is a beautiful city, what I'm actually going to take down in my notes is Adelaide, beautiful city. I'm not going to write down all the 5 words in the sentence. I'm only going to write down 3 words, and those 3 words in abbreviated form. And the same rule will apply in the Punjabi segment as well. For example, they said Adelaide ek sona shehar hai. Now, the way I would be taking my notes is Adelaide ek sona shehar hai. Like this. So, Adelaide एक सोना शहर है. Now, for example, while listening to this segment, you were able to figure out that Sona means beautiful, शहर means city. If your brain was able to figure out the translation of those Punjabi words instantly on the spot, what I would do in the exam for my note taking is Adelaide एक beautiful city है. Few words in Punjabi like these, एक है. Few words in English, mixture of it. Now again, your question to me could be, hey, if I'm mixing out these two languages, especially these two words, how would I be able to figure out which language do I actually need to speak out? Won't I get confused as to which language I need to translate that in? Hey, this is when the strategy number 2 comes into the picture, that you need to use the letters P and E. Now, if I would have already written down the letter E here, and even if I would have mixed two languages, English and Punjabi, still my brain will never ever get confused as to which language do I need to translate, because I can see the letter E, my brain straight away knows that, hey, it doesn't matter which language I've taken my notes in, I need to speak out English at the end. That is why following these strategies is very important. They will take you far. Now, last but not the least is tip number 4. Now, tip number 4 states that always make sure that you take notes of the introduction. Now, if you have heard the dialogue before, we know what happens is, before the conversation of two people start, the very first sentence or couple of sentences that they speak out is the introduction. As in, this dialogue is going to be between an English speaker, Mr. James, and a Punjabi speaker, Mr. Singh. This dialogue is regarding a domestic violence. The dialogue begins now. Something like that sort of introduction will happen. Afterwards, the conversation of two people will start. Now, we know that we don't have to translate the introduction. The dialogue starts after the introduction is completed. But my recommendation and suggestion would be, make sure you take notes of the introduction. You might ask me why. What's the point of taking notes of introduction? I can just listen and keep that in mind. No, think about it. Once they speak out the introduction, if you take notes of the introduction, trust me, your first few segments are going to be a lot easier. I'll give you an example. For example, the introduction was, this dialogue is between an English speaker, Mr. James, and a Punjabi speaker, Mr. Singh. The dialogue is regarding a domestic violence case. The dialogue begins now. Now, afterwards, trust me, at least first two segments are going to introduce those two persons. For example, let's say the English person starts speaking the first segment. They will say, "Hi, Mr. Singh, welcome to my office. My name is James. How can I help you today?" Right? Now, if you were to write down the note taking of this, you would write something like this. "Hi, Mr. Singh. My name is James. Welcome to my office. How can I help you today?" Like this. However, if you would have taken the notes of the introduction, few words you don't even need to write them down again. How? "Hi, Mr. Singh. Can you see the word Mr. Singh already written in my introduction?" Yes. So if I have to take notes of my first segment, I don't even need to write down Mr. Singh again. What I can do is, "Hi," then Mr. Singh, I'll put a circle and then I can drag like an arrow at the bottom. Because by looking at this, I can already see that I'm going to talk about Mr. Singh. So it will take you less time in taking notes. And if you take less time in taking notes, obviously you can write down a lot more. Same thing, my name is James. You don't need to write down the word James again because you've already written that down in an introduction. My name is, I can put a circle around the word James and I can put an arrow here. Same thing will help you in your next segment. Let's say the Punjabi speaker says, "Sat Sri Akal Shriman James, मैं इत्थे घरेलू हिंसा दे मामले बारे ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਚਰਚਾ ਕਰਨ ਆਇਆ ਹਾਂ." For example, now I can already see domestic violence case means ਘਰੇਲੂ ਹਿੰਸਾ ਮਾਮਲਾ. So I don't need to write down that domestic violence case, all these three words again. I can just put a circle around it and then I can just put an arrow here. So I already know what I'm going to talk about in my next segment as well. That's the main reason I want you, I encourage you, I suggest you to take notes of introduction. It will take you a few seconds to take notes of your introduction, but trust me, for the first few segments, this is definitely going to help you. So these were the strategies that I wanted to talk to you about. Now, before I proceed and play a few segments, also people who are going to prepare or who are already preparing for their NAATI Punjabi exam, we have already compiled our NAATI Punjabi and also NAATI Hindi prediction file. Both files are ready for 2021. Both of those files have got about 25 most repeated dialogues of 2021 that most of my students have got. They at least get one dialogue repeated, and if they get really lucky, they even get both of their dialogues repeated. In order to get that prediction file from us, the link of our Instagram account will be in the description. Click on the link, send us a message, and we can discuss further. Right, so I'm going to play the dialogue now. So I'll play the introduction and I'll play first two segments and I'll take notes right now so that you guys can understand what am I doing and what sort of information do I need to grab out of the given segments. Let's start.
This dialogue takes place between a Punjabi-speaking applicant for refugee status in Australia and an officer of the Department of Immigration and Multicultural and Indigenous Affairs. The interview takes place at an Australian international airport. The dialogue begins now.
Good morning. My name is Geraldine Smith. I'm an officer of the Department of Immigration and Multicultural Affairs. I've been asked to conduct a preliminary interview with you about your application.
Now, this is exactly what I've done that I explained earlier on, that I've taken the notes of the introduction like this, and then I've taken the notes of my first segment in English language. Now, since she spoke English, that means I need to speak out the Punjabi of that. Now, this is the best part here. Since I've taken the notes of my introduction while taking notes of my first segment, it was extremely easy for me because that big word, Department of Immigration and Multicultural Affairs, I didn't have to write it down again. I just circled it down and then I've just put an arrow here. So once you take the notes in the introduction part, you don't have to take the notes again and again. And then I've made sure that I've shortened down every single word possible. When she said good morning, I've written GM, very self-explanatory. When she said Geraldine Smith, since it was a big word, I've shortened it down again. And then officer of Department of Immigration and Multicultural Affairs, I've put an arrow here. Asked preliminary PRE, interview INT regarding your application APP. So I've only written the main words of the segment. I haven't written is, am, are, was, were, these kind of words. And I've made sure those main words have been abbreviated as short as possible. So now this is how I would be translating it out. Shubh Saver, मेरा नाम जैरल्डीन स्मिथ है। मैं ਆਵਾਸ ਤੇ ਵਿਭਾਗ ਅਤੇ ਬਹੁ ਸੱਭਿਆਚਾਰਕ ਮਾਮਲਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਅਫਸਰ ਹਾਂ। ਮੈਨੂੰ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਅਰਜ਼ੀ ਬਾਰੇ ਸ਼ੁਰੂਆਤੀ ਵਾਰਤਾਲਾਪ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਕਿਹਾ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ। Now, how was I able to translate every single word written into Punjabi instantly? Because I've memorized all the vocabulary words by heart. If you ask me a Punjabi word, I can translate that into English instantly. And the other way around, if you give me an English word, I can give you the Punjabi word straight away. You have to memorize the vocabulary words both sides. I've seen many students, what they do is they'll read out the English, they'll memorize the Punjabi of it, but they never do the other way around. This is how you struggle during translating a Punjabi segment into English, because the words do not click straight away. And if the words in the exam do not click straight away, that is when the issues start. So we need to make sure that we never let that happen. We need to memorize the vocabulary words by heart. I'll play out the next segment. Now, as I said, before I listen to the next segment, I'll put an E letter here. So now I know it doesn't matter which language I take my notes in. I need to speak the English of it.
Smith sahab, meher karke meri madad karo. Main शरणार्थी हाँ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਇਸ ਸੋਹਣੇ ਮੁਲਕ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਹਾਰਾ ਲੈਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦਾ ਹਾਂ। ਮੈਂ ਸੁਣਿਆ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਸ ਮੁਲਕ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਨਸਾਨੀਅਤ ਹੱਕਾਂ ਦਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਸਤਿਕਾਰ ਹੈ।
Right. So now I've taken the notes of the Punjabi segment into English. Now, if you see here, I've mixed out my note taking. The Punjabi words that my brain was able to translate instantly, what I have done is I've written down the English of them already, because now when I speak out my answer, my brain doesn't have to translate every single word. They only need to translate few words that are not changed yet. Now afterwards, the words such as Sona Mulk. Now my brain wasn't able to translate these two words on the spot, so I've written the same, exactly the same what was said in the segment, Sona Mulk. Then heard, Insaniyat Hakkan da Satkar. Main sunya hai. I already translated that by writing down the word heard. Main sunya hai. The translation of that is I have heard. But what have I taken in my note taking? Just the word heard. So this is something that you guys need to decide. How can you abbreviate the words, and how can you make sure the words are shortened down as much as possible, because that is going to save you a lot of hassle in taking down the notes. So you need to make sure and have a goal set with you that the moment that audio stops playing, you should have pretty much taken the notes of all of it. And if you would have seen now, the moment that audio stopped, within 1 or 2 seconds, I was able to finish down the note taking of the complete segment. This is how quick and this is how accurate you need to be. So now when I try to translate out this segment, this is how it would sound like. Mr. Smith, please help me. I'm a refugee and I want to get support in your beautiful country. I've heard that your country has a great respect for human rights. So this is how I would be translating. And as I said, if you memorize the vocabulary well from Punjabi to English as well, your job would be very easy afterwards, because your brain is able to instantly convert and translate every single word. So I hope you liked this video and this video made sense to you, especially people who are going to sit for their NAATI exam very, very soon. Do watch this video again and again. I would say, if you haven't understood it yet, make sure that you are following all the strategies that I've given in this video. Make sure you implement all these strategies. That's extremely important. Just taking notes is not going to help you. You actually need to put in the work. And as I said, we have already made up our NAATI Hindi and Punjabi, both prediction files are ready for 2021. So if you are going to give your exam soon, do make sure you contact us on Instagram. The link is in the description. We can discuss over there. And if you have any sort of questions, do make sure you post them in the comment section down below. I will make sure that I answer them as quickly as possible so that we can fetch these 5 permanent residency points as quickly as possible. We smash this exam on the very first attempt. With that, I'm done with this video. I hope you guys have a great day. Stay safe. All the best if you are going to give your exam soon. And I will see you guys in the next video.